interested in one of these. The costs are crazy these days for supplies and all to make these, but Tanya makes them by hand. $30
Nice.
plus shipping, but you could be a member of the Sinister Mysteries Club. So contact us. I cleared it with the boss, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. Got the government types, got the aliens, got the gas mask, got the
Yeah,
chemical beaker,
they make
and
quite a.
got the money and the UFO.
That is awesome. I like it. I like it. I
So,
like it.
and Craig will be getting his hopefully tomorrow, like I said, because, sir, it is your birthday tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
I guess that's all the singing I'll be
48.
doing.
48.
48. I'm double nickels on November 4th. So I'm testing the waters a few years up the road for you. It's the least I can do for all you do for me.
I appreciate it. That's really nice.
So let's say hi to the audience, then let's roll the intro, and then let's get down to this because hello, Harlan. Hello, Tanya. Hello, Lori. Lori loves the shirt. Thank you. We're pretty excited. I'm sure it'll get stares in the Eastern Ohio places of business where we go. Tanya says, happy birthday, Craig. We'll throw that up on the screen there. Harlan says, one of my favorite topics. This is a topic, Craig, that's getting a ton of airplay between RFK Jr., who's being very vocal about things. And there's a huge irony that we'll talk about at the very end of the show that we'll leave the audience with about him talking about these assassinations. And the other thing is that it's 60 years and we still haven't gotten the documents.
We never really will.
Yeah, because I think you and I are going to show why tonight.
Yeah.
Why this just you can't like show a glimpse of this without people asking more questions and more questions. And are you familiar with this book, Craig, Dr. Mary's Monkey?
I've heard of it. I've never read it.
Highly recommended. Colleague, fellow writer turned me on to this during the lockdown. At the appropriate point, I'll tell folks a little bit. This book could probably be 2 shows because it's mind-blowing. And that's what I've learned. Like, I read Jim Garrison's book forever ago. Love the Oliver Stone movie. Read all the stuff that has come out, Craig. But in doing like Parallels, Pathways, and Patterns and doing Sinister Mysteries, there were probably at least 8 or 9 reasons why they wanted John F. Kennedy dead.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was systematically attempting to dismantle what Ike was warning us about when he left office. And it was 2 years later, 2.5 years later, he was gone. And then I found out some really cool stuff about RFK because he gets short shrift. Nobody really talks about the RFK assassination.
No, because it's just most, one, he wasn't, besides the family, he was, it's not as big a profile as obviously the president of the United States. I mean, it basically was a famous person got killed. I mean, it's just, no more than I think any congressman or senator if something was to happen. I mean, it's just, it's going to get some play, but yeah, most people, they're just going to be like, oh yeah, he was killed, but they're not going to have the same. They're not going to remember Walter Cronkite getting up there and, giving the whole, recap of everything that happened type stuff.
And I think too, because it happened on television and then what was it the next day or a couple days later,
2 days later,
Jack Ruby plugs, you see that live on television. As far as I know, RFK, him going through that kitchen was not televised. There's no footage of it.
Yeah,
only photographs. So that changes it. Plus 2 months before, MLK was assassinated. So I don't want to say that assassinations were becoming du jour, but as you and I have covered with Condor, as I've talked about with Che Guevara and so on, and the plots to endlessly, I think through Bill Clinton's time, there are 128 documented attempts on Fidel Castro's life by the United States. So I think it kind of became du jour. So
you almost become godlike status at that point. If the United States has tried to kill you 120 times and you've escaped every single one, do you start going around, pretty much the people are like the untouchable Castro, you just go around with it, just like you're a deity at that point.
Yeah, it was like just real quickly. The CIA got a hold, and folks, this is all part and parcel with the Kennedys, so it's not really that far afield. But the CIA gets a hold of one of Fidel Castro's lovers, right, in Miami. and they convince her that this guy is no good and she's got to kill him. So she goes to, I think he was coming to Miami was the thing. And so she goes up to his room. She gets into the room. She looks into his bearded eyes, and you know how the beard goes. And she breaks out into tears. And he says, "Come on, what's up?" And she hands him the gun, and they make love while the CIA handlers are in the lobby thinking that he's getting banged and she's getting banged. And so I just think that those stories are precious. The CIA was so sinister. We always talk about that, but in a lot of ways inept too.
Yeah, but it's like it was almost Keystone Cops in some way, the way that they did some stuff, but then other ways it's just like, they were intense and and amazing what they came up with. But in some of these ones, it's like I almost think that they did it on purpose to make it just make it seem like they were trying, but at the same time they were just kind of like, we're gonna make it look like we're trying to take you out.
Yeah, for sure. And putting some kind of flakes in his food to make his beard come out, because if he lost the beard, he'd lose the mojo. Again, this should be very appealing to the Three Beards.
Yeah,
I was wearing my Three Beards t-shirt today, as a matter of fact. So, but I just had to wear this one today. Chassis says happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it.
So let's just take a really quick breather here. We're running the intro.
Roll that footage.
But my compulsive ways say I got to roll the video. So we'll see you in a minute and 19.
There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon, the preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts, because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, the couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms.
And Tanya's amazing voice there saying where if you stay long enough, anything is possible and even probable. When I talk about this Dr. Mary's monkey, it's just nuts stuff how much is tied in this. So, Craig, I'm going to do my academic thing and get it out of the way.
Okay.
And jump in as you'd like to. But in the 2.5 years that Kennedy was president, he really made it his mission, while having numerous affairs, including with the beautiful Marilyn Monroe, to try to dismantle the military-industrial complex. Following on the heels of his mentors, James Forrestal from the U.S. Navy, who they killed, pushed out a window at the Bethesda Hospital, and Ike, who warned us as he was outgoing. So Kennedy gets in in January of 1961. In February 19th, he issues an executive order. He comes right out. Those playing Sinister Mystery Bingo, it's Executive Order 10920. And this ends something called the Operations Coordinating Board, which is a Cold War PSYOPs program going all the way back to 51. This is another really important part. Ike was trying to end the Cold War. Bissell and Dulles, who you're going to hear those names a lot tonight from the CIA, these two cats defy a no-fly order with the U-2 2 weeks before Ike and Khrushchev are supposed to have a big summit, and it scuttles the summit. They obey a direct order from the president, grounding the OU-2 flights. These guys did not want. That's why we got the money S in Sinister. This really all comes down to the national security state, which means the defense contractors. So he's right out of the bat. He's trying to get rid of the CIA or weaken it, severely weaken it, and find out about this majestic 12. February 22nd, 3 days later, he says to Khrushchev, look, let's end the hostilities. Let's talk. This gets a very powerful CIA, a very, Lockheed Martin is coming up. Skunk Works is in the work. This gets them very furious. And then April 17th, Bay of Pigs. JFK is embarrassed. He's furious. The CIA has foisted this program on him months into his presidency. And of course, he blames Alan Dulles, Directorate of Plans for the CIA, Robert Bissell, and Deputy Director of the CIA, General Charles P. Cabell. Please remember that last name, Cabell, because we're talking about the Kennedy assassination. Then 10 days later, JFK does, I always read it, and I'm not reading it tonight. He does that great speech, Craig, to the Newspaper Publishers Association, which is way more open and honest than even Ike's speech, where he says, like, we've been co-opted and they're throwing all this stuff at it. Yeah, you can go back and watch old episodes, folks. Then June 28th, this is, again, first 6 months of his presidency, he directs the Department of Defense to oversee the CIA and look into MJ-12. So he wasn't getting what he wanted in February. He tries again in June. Now, here's the beginning of the Kennedy assassination as I see it. Alan Dulles, who's head of Majestic 12, and really just think of Majestic 12 as 12 very powerful people from science, from the military, and from intelligence who are really running the country. This is the deep state encapsulated in these 12 people that I've talked about so much. He writes to these 6 MJ-12 members, and he writes to the counterintelligence director, James Joseph Angleton, and he talks about something called Project Environment. And in this, he says the weather is dry, but it needs to be wet. Wet is especially Russian for liquidating someone, suiciding them, assassinating them. So this goes all the way back to June of 1961. Then November 5th, Dulles writes a letter to JFK, and he says that UFO psyops, Mr. President, are nothing but psyops, or UFOs are nothing but psyops against Russia. If they are off-world, they're not a security threat. Back the hell off and quit asking about MJ-12. So this, again, this is the head of the CIA. But he's already on the outs with Kennedy. As a matter of fact, 3 weeks later, he resigns. He resigns, and then in January and March, Robert Bissell, General Cabell. General Cabell's brother is Earl Cabell, the mayor of Dallas. Craig, Tanya and I talk a lot about the deep state, the elites. They like to call their shots. Like, that's a Captain Obvious thing. This guy is second in command at the CIA. He's forced to resign by Kennedy. So they go, let's do it in Dallas, where my brother is the friggin' mayor.
Well, and that will kind of, we're going to, I'm not going to bring it up right now, but we'll kind of get to it right here. This is kind of where some of the theories around Jack Ruby come into play, is what you just talked about with these connections, because it's like, how did he get access? How did he get these things? And this is some of the stuff where we'll as you proceed, we'll get into this, and I'll be able to bring some of those things up to where his ties and why he of people would have been involved.
Yeah, that's great, because I got some notes on that too, but I'm going to give you lead on that. So August 5th, of course, of 1961, a dark day for Marilyn Monroe fans. And maybe someday we'll do an episode just on Marilyn's. But here's the encapsulation. She was a security risk. She was sleeping with both brothers. J. Edgar Hoover gets so pissed off, he says to JFK, stop now. Like, are you crazy? This girl has like communist ties. She's not the idiot She's not the bubblehead blonde that some people perceive her as. She's dangerous. Knock it off. So he foists her off on RFK, who, for numerous reasons, then doesn't want to have anything to do with her either. Well, hell has no fury like a woman scorned. It culminates in him going to where she was staying. Now, this was on a piece of property that was owned by Peter Lawford, who was Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s brother-in-law. And there are some tapes. There are some interesting recordings. There are transcripts. Charles Smart and I were talking today about some FOIA things that have been released about wiretaps. So I mentioned Angleton, counterintelligence guy at the CIA. He authorized these secret wiretaps. The transcripts, and there's a really good book by Michael Sala about Ike and JFK and MJ-12 and all. These transcripts basically say RFK is at the house and he says, "Where are the effing diaries? I want the effing diary. Give it to me." And what that is about is she was taking copious notes, Greg, and they're pillow talking. They're pillow talking about Cuba. They're pillow talking about UFOs. Here's what I think happened, quite honestly, and then we'll move on. She was going to have a press conference the next couple of days. I think Robert says, "Look, let me go. Let me talk to her. Let me try to sort this out." When he goes back in the afternoon and it doesn't go well, she doesn't give him what she wants. They come back in the evening. They come back with a doctor. They come back with some police, is the lure. I think they were going to drug her with barbiturates just enough. Robert wanted to know where the hell that diary was, because she could go to a press conference and talk about any kind of goofy shit she wanted without the diary as kind of proof. The lore has it that the doctor had orders from the CIA to kill her, to give her a lethal dose. So I kind of think, I don't know, I think that's what happened. So now we get into 1963. Okay, so a little break there. So, and I'm sure everybody's a little concerned, scared, letting things, settle down. June 4th, again, Sinister Ministry, Executive Order 11110 gave the U.S. Treasury power to issue silver notes, just like we were talking about, Craig, with the Federal Reserve. I'm pursuing the thread when I do an episode on Nixon in the 70s, that it was the bankers that ultimately undid Nixon. They had done killing, and I think it was a message to future presidents. There are way the hell worse things than dying, than getting your head blown off, and that's being shamed and having to resign, and someone who was so ambitious to end their career. So,
well, you think in a way, wouldn't that be a worse penalty?
Oh, absolutely,
punishment anyway, because it's because obviously the threats of death aren't working. And so when you actually do the public humiliation thing, it's like you basically put the note. It's like, look, like you said, you're going to spend the next, the rest of your life as this disgrace, and, all we told you to do was shut up, quit doing it. And it's like, he didn't listen. So now look at you.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. And he was the guy, Nixon. We'll talk about it when we get into
there's somebody else going in the currently thing that's kind of going through the same thing.
Yeah, there sure is. And you know who else was too? A certain governor of New York during the pandemic.
Yep.
They did it to him too.
Yep.
And then they did it to some news anchors. So they've learned that really is. And then there's a certain guy. I don't know if this, our most recent president before Bush. Their messages being sent to him certainly, but also Russell Brand.
Yep.
I mean, the timing of that, and as most people are saying, and I think rightfully so, two things can be true at the same time. Yeah, on that many drugs and with his sexual addictions, he probably did some really shady stuff. But with 6.5 million loyal viewers on his Rumble channel,
he's now a threat
about the media and all. Yeah,
yep. He's now a threat, and so it's real easy to stir those things back up.
Yeah, so that's the modus operandi, and for us little guys, they shadow ban us. That's what they do for us. So in September of 1963, JFK is pushing for CIA UFO information to be released to NASA. He pledges cooperation with the USSR in space and lunar missions. And Khrushchev says, listen, comrade, we're good. We're cool. But then November 11th, a Soviet Mars mission fails, and Khrushchev calls him up and goes, "Yeah, let's play." So then November 12th, a top secret memorandum is released from JFK to CIA Director John McCone regarding UFOs and national security. On that same day, he also sends a top secret memorandum to NASA Administrator James Webb saying, let's cooperate with the Soviets. And I'm reading a really good book now by Paul Blake Smith. I don't know if you know his work, Craig. It's really good. But this is about Gleason and Nixon and what might have happened at Homestead Air Force Base in 73, which I'm going to talk about next week on Triple P. But he says, Paul Blake Smith in his book says that that some people very close to the situation say that that's what did it. The UFO release of information couldn't happen. I think that that's just one thing of many, many things, which we'll talk about tonight. November 20th now, 2 days before the assassination, the McCone memo has handwriting by William Colby, who goes on to be a CIA chief. But he's the CIA chief for Far East Asia at the time. And it says, Angleton has MJ directive. And that goes back to Project Environment and MJ-12, handwritten by William Colby, future CIA director. And then on November 22nd, of course, in Dallas, Kennedy's assassinated. So abundant reasons there, I think, Craig, to do away with this man.
Oh yeah, he was most definitely somebody that was not going to be controlled, and there was. I mean, I can only imagine. So you get that what if history. It's like he's one of the ones. It's kind of like World War II. World War II. What if Hitler won? There's a lot of people do that what if history thing. A lot of people. This is another one of those cases where like, what would have happened if JFK hadn't been shot? Like they missed or something like that. Where would he have doubled down to that point and said, "Oh, it's like okay, now we're on." And would if he have stepped up even and pushed even harder? And then it's like, what would the story be now? This is one of those cases where it's just the what ifs. It's a fun exercise. It's a waste of mental energy. Because the what if exercise. I mean, it's still fun, but it's just like anything. It's like worrying about something that's never existed.
I agree. Speculative history can be really helpful, except in this case, they pulled out all the stops, which is where to talk about with our remaining time. They pulled out all the stops to make sure that this guy. Now it gets crazy. There's a book, folks. It's been on my reading list for about 3 years. I am eventually going to get to it. I was supposed to read it years ago, and Amazon screwed up the order, so I figured, okay, maybe it's not time. They delivered it to an old address of mine randomly. It's by a man named George Schwimmer, and it's called Doppelganger, The Legend of Lee Harvey Oswald. And it postulates, Craig, that there was not one Lee Harvey Oswald, but there were two. And that's what accounts for the weird timelines and all that stuff. I mean, folks, some of this stuff, we're just going to touch on it and get off. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I think I think I remember seeing something like that. That's one of the ones, like the possibilities. I mean, there's also the basis, like one of the ones, another book, if you remember, Point of Impact by Stephen Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll bring up that one too, because that's one of the theories that I'm pretty on board with Lee Harvey Oswald.
You are as a lone
as Patsy.
Oh yes, sir. He was there. He was there.
He was there. And I mean, I don't know if we want to get into that part right now. I mean, since we're already talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, let's do that because everything else that I have is pretty much after the fact.
Yeah, because well, one of the things, like the basis, like most people, I mean, like I said, we can rehash some of it. Most people know Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, most of the people know this story. The thing is, he was he was in the Marines. He actually ended up getting. The funny part is, this is the part I didn't know. He was there was two attempted court martials for stuff that self-inflicted gunshot. Like one was he shot himself in the elbow with a wasn't supposed to have this 22, and then the other one, he ended up for arguing with a sergeant over I can't remember what the incident was, but yeah, that was the other one. That was the other one. He ended up just, it was like a discharge, but it wasn't dishonorably. He was just discharged but he was at 19. I want to say that was the time when he fled, he basically defected to the Soviet Union via left. But at one point, I think it was August 16th of 1963. So this was, what, 3 months prior to the assassination. He's out passing around pro Castro leaflets. So he's got that young, like what a lot of college students do. They're all walking around with the Che Guevara shirts. They're all, that's everybody's in love with this thing. They don't really see the dark side. They see the positive thing, the community, the communism. It's like coming together, they see this part. So I think he kind of fell in love with that aspect, and that's why he went there. So I think a lot of people hang on to that as that's why he killed Kennedy, because he was a communist sympathizer. What I brought up with that Point of Impact book, do you remember the movie Shooter in 2007 with Mark Wahlberg?
Yeah, I did.
That's part of, like, for Lee Harvey Oswald. I want to say that in a way, I'm pretty sure that book was loosely taken, from that, used as the basis of that story, because in that movie, just like in the story, I think Lee Harvey Oswald was brought in as a consultant, and that he, through the CIA, so like there's going to be, we think there's going to be an attempt on the president's life, so we've got to, just like in the movie, we think that this might be the place that they need to do it. So how would you do it? He goes up there, fingerprints on the gun. You have all these things. He earned in 1956. He scored a 212 on the shooting, which earned him a sharpshooter outranking, which means that you are an excellent, you are one of the top shooters. So he has that ability, and so you bring him up here as a consultant. I mean, if you're up there, you're like, okay, the motorcade's coming right here. That's where I would pull, that would be to make sure it's, so you have all that stuff, and they're like, okay, well, that's great. We're going to keep that, and we're going to keep that advice. Well, all of a sudden, Lee Harvey Oswald, because from the thing he's always claimed, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. And so just like in the movie, well, your fingerprints, you have all this stuff on the, this is prior to a lot of, police forensics, but this still, you would have people that would be able to, eyewitnesses that say, no, I saw him in the depository, because he would have literally been there. But as eyewitnesses, especially that time, you don't have, CCTV. You have, all you're going to have is little Miss Johnson that was at the corner store that said, oh no, I saw that guy coming down the stairwell. Yeah, that is definitely him. And so it could really be, you could really see, because even like that post where he has him posing with his rifle.
Yep.
There's all this, basically in a case like now, because I don't know if you remember, they did some mock trials like years later, and one came up with a hung jury and another one acquitted Oswald. And this thing, if it went to trial, and that's where the story of old Jack Ruby comes into play. Is just like in that movie Shooter, you got to tie up the loose end.
Oh yeah.
So like my theory that I buy into, okay, he's your shooter. He's the one that killed Kennedy, but he's saying that I didn't do it. Well, we got to shut this guy up before he actually names a name, does something like this. Well, here you have Jack Ruby. Why would he kill Oswald? Because he was just grieved over the president being killed.
That's the cover story.
But here's a guy who's a nightclub owner there in the Dallas area, and he's got several activities that actually link him to the Chicago outfit, which if anybody doesn't know that one, look in the 1920s, there's a certain guy by the name of Al Capone that was a Don. And so he's got these mob ties, and what easier to CIA having connections with organized crime already. You're like, we need a guy to take out this guy. So this is where it gets so he shows up 2 days later. So it's November 22nd, President Kennedy's assassinated. Lee Harvey Oswald is being taken out of the Dallas Municipal Building. Well, just a few minutes prior to this, Jack Ruby shows up in his car with his dog. I think it's a dachshund. This is what the story. He shows up here because he has to wire some emergency funds to an employee. So he goes to Wells Fargo, and he has a timestamp on the money order that shows 11:17 a.m. Well, he then proceeds to walk half a block, ends up in the basement of the municipal building. It just happens he's got his 38 with him, and he just happens to mingle up with the press corps. And right as Harvey Oswald comes in, you'll see, everybody's seen the famous photo, of Oswald, doing this thing. Jack Ruby pulls out his 38, 30, I think it was a 38 caliber Colt Cobra revolver, pulls out one shot right to the left, mortally wounds Oswald. He can't talk anymore.
Right.
He's now been silenced. And so the whole thing is, you look at the ties, and this is where, when I said earlier with you talking about the Dallas, the mayor and all this stuff, Jack Ruby was tied in with a lot of some of these nefarious back end dealings, because he wanted to be a power player in the community. So he was always trying, he was always trying to do these deals, he was involved with, he had ties to some of these organized crimes. I think the CIA even and the FBI tried to use him as an informant at one point as well. And so he definitely wasn't squeaky clean, but I'm kind of buying in that one. I'm not sure where you are. I actually feel like there is some real plausibility to that, whether or not you have the multiple shooters, but you definitely have somebody that you now have your patsy, which is a perfect fall guy. The guy can make the shot. That wouldn't have been a hard shot for a sharpshooter in any way. It's like they're saying, but it was a moving target. If you're that score of a sharpshooter, yeah, you're plink, no problem. You're setting the gun down, you're walking away. It's not that difficult of a shot.
Right. So just to go with Jack Ruby, so Frank Sturgis, who was one of the Watergate guys, this is all bound up together, folks. And what I'm really learning by doing all this deep diving through the decades and making these connections is, once you are read in, you become super valuable, because you want a few people read in as possible. So you want to use the same guys over and over. Jack Ruby, according to my research, knew Nixon going all the way back to the 1940s, when Nixon was a congressman. And they all kind of congregated together in Florida. It's a really interesting thing. Of course, that was the hotbed, because Cuba's not very far away from Miami at all. It's the Meyer Lanskys and the Santos Traficante Juniors, the big mobsters at the time, who were losing their shirts because they didn't have Havana anymore. Havana was like Las Vegas. And it dried up, and they wanted something done about this Castro, because people are often confused about, what the hell did the mafia give a shit, and what was all that about? It was very prevalent at the time. So let's talk about, I'm going to talk about this right now. It probably goes back about 10 years that I first read this theory, and gosh, it makes so much sense to me. And I'm kind of showing my paranormal hat with this, but it's something called the killing of the king. Dallas is near the 33rd parallel, Freemasons, 33rd level, all of that kind of stuff. You have the three tramps, these homeless guys, the hobos or whatever. The theory is that that's Jubella, Jubello, and Jubellum. And there were route changes. He was supposed to basically go from Love Field Airport right to the Dallas Trade Market, where he was giving a speech. They rerouted him through Dealey Plaza, which academics rightly call a kill zone. Then he's in this 1961 Lincoln Continental convertible that has a clear top, like the Pope Mobile. And they decide to take it off. There are serious Secret Service breaches and gaps. Some law enforcement were told to stand down. There are all these little bits and pieces that have come out. And then just in the past month, there's a Secret Service agent called Paul Landis, and you can see him. I think you can see him in the Zapruder film, and you can see him in some of the pictures. He took a bullet that came out of Kennedy's neck. This was an undercharged bullet. So Lee Harvey Oswald had a Carcano. I know that my dad had a replica of it. He had one of these Carcanos. But it was World War II surplus ammunition for these Carcanos, and they were often undercharged. So it went into his neck, it came back out, and it was laying on the back deck of the convertible. Well, Paul Landis picked up this bullet, and he put it on Kennedy's stretcher. It was moved to Connolly's stretcher. This, as they're saying now, this month especially, does away with the magic bullet theory, which I always thought was, even though there are some really smart guys who have tried to make the magic bullet work, it just has never worked.
Yeah.
To go here and go through Connolly and then do this. So you go, okay, well, Oswald was getting him from the back. And then, of course, there's that famous thing in the movie JFK, back into the left. And they're playing the film, the Zapruder film in the courtroom over and over again. So how do you cover that up? Well, here's how they did it, folks. They bring in a Navy doctor who has no experience with autopsies, who later burns his notes, and they lose Kennedy's brain. They lose his brain. Meanwhile, there's a theory that they had him on a plane from Dallas to where they took him, and on that plane, they reconstructed as best they could his skull to make the narrative work. That seems reasonable to me. Like, they realize, oh shit, this is too obvious. Either Oswald was too slow, he hesitated, so he didn't get a front shot. Of course, with just like NASA, the CIA, and Assassinations, they have redundancies. And I think with that second shooter, when we talk about RFK, there was also a second shooter.
Kind of what you're just saying right there too. That's where it would make sense that if he was a patsy, if he based off his abilities, he would have been able to make that shot. No problem. That's, I think if there was somebody else that took the shot, trying, as he's getting, to frame Oswald, he's doing that.
Yeah.
That person most likely didn't have the same abilities. And so that's why you would need to shot, okay, crap, that one didn't work. You have your backup shooter. And that's why, like you said, now you have this stuff that's inconsistent when they say, well, there's no way he would have been, look at the angle of this, he was off. Yeah, because I don't think, just like he said, I don't think he was even there. I think this is when he was brought in, like the CIA, as a consultation, just for the sheer fact of we now have our patsy. He's been placed at the scene. He's touched the weapon. He's staged. He laid out exactly, this is how I would do it, and so they recreated it exactly how just like in the movie. They laid out exactly how, if I was to take this shot, this is where I would be, and that's where the shot comes from.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So the kill shot did come from the grassy knoll. Like I said, the moods, and as Charles gives us some more information here, films show that SS agents who tried to mount the bumper of the limo as per usual were left at the airport. So that was Love Field. So, and you got the mayor of Dallas working with you. You alter the route. I mean, kind of nuts. So anyway, I really, something changed that day. I did the 1960s last week on Triple P, and I called it From Camelot to Altamont. A lot changed that decade. With our old friend Tricky Dick and what LBJ did and all the things we've talked about, like Condor and Air America and all of that. We talked about all that. So here's the last thing I want to talk about as far as JFK, and this is E. Howard Hunt. So E. Howard Hunt, of course, is most famous for being, along with G. Gordon Liddy, and there have been some really good things on HBO and I think maybe on Hulu called Gaslight and Nixon's Plumbers. Folks, you should watch that. Woody Harrelson plays E. Howard Hunt. So E. Howard Hunt was at one point an executive assistant to Allen Dulles. Ooh, there you go again. He was chief of the Mexico station. Mexico was a hotbed of communist activity. And Craig, as our friend Devil's Advocate shared with us, there was a recent military parade in Mexico, and there were Russian units there, and there were Chinese units there. So there have still been these communist elements in Mexico. All of this is here. E. Howard Hunt is also involved tangentially with the assassination of Che Guevara in Bolivia. And of course, he's one of the principals in Watergate. There's this other dude that they're all pals with named Bibi Rebozo, who Bibi Rebozo has the best name on the planet to me. What a great name, Bibi Rebozo. He is a really quiet banker, very influential, very powerful. He's got lots of money and lots of connections. And he and Nixon are best friends. And so all these different people are involved, all these logistics, Frank Sturgis, all these different guys. The mafia is involved, right? So E. Howard Hunt is on his deathbed in the 2000s, and he calls his son to the house, and he can barely talk, and he writes on a piece of paper, he writes this. He writes LBJ. Then he draws a line, and he writes Cord Meyer. Now, Cord Meyer was a CIA agent who JFK was stooping his wife, Mary, and she wound up dead. Then he writes Bill Harvey, who's another CIA agent. Then he writes down David Morales, who was a CIA Black Ops specialist. So these could have been the three dudes right there. Bill Harvey, Cord Meyer, and David Morales could have been Jubello, and Jubellum. And then he writes French gunman Grassy Knoll. So again, that's another connection there. Another name I want to put in, Craig, before I put a kind of button on JFK for me is George Bush the first, who worked with CIA agent Felix Rodriguez, who masterminded the Che Guevara assassination. He was head of CIA ops along with the Bolivian army at the time that Che was there, and they were really protecting the mines and crushing mines and all this. But George Bush worked with Felix Rodriguez, recruiting right-wing Cuban exiles for the Bay of Pigs Cuba invasion. And George Bush was definitely in Texas that day, and some people say he was in Dallas. So you have two future, three, because you have LBJ, who's the obvious one, who was kind of masterminding this whole thing, and he, of course, had to agree to it. So you have three future presidents that are linked to this assassination. That's mind-blowing. It shows you how small a world it is.
Well, that was kind of the picture below. So that's why I put their picture in there too. It really looks like he was the one that made the final call.
Yeah, that's my understanding, that this may not have gone, but Alan Dulles was so pissed off. And if you think about Alan Dulles, CIA director, head of MJ-12, John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State, and Kennedy inherited these guys from Ike. So there was supposed to be continuity there. And they're the United Fruit Company guys. They're running all the stuff in Central America, Latin America, along with the Rockefellers, all these different players who all come together in the Nixon years, right? Nelson Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger. And it's not a small leap of faith going, this guy is gonna ruin things for everybody. He and his brother. We need to take him out. Which I think brings us to RFK, unless you have a button on JFK. So RFK. I learned a lot this week. RFK was killed June 5th, 1968 at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California. He was the odds-on favorite. He was riding a really, really strong wave going into the August 1968 Democratic National Convention. If you remember, the convention was a shit show, right? You had the kids being gassed, the people in the hotels. They're using the hotel for triage. Senator Abraham Ribicoff said it was Gestapo tactics on the streets of Chicago. Mayor Daley is saying this Jew, so-and-so, son of a this and that. You could read his lips on national television. Oh, yeah. It was horrible. Meanwhile, Nixon runs the smoothest in his playground where Rubizzo and all these other guys are in, I think it was in Miami, was the Republican National Convention. Total opposite. Like they had this thing locked up, done. So the story goes that there is this man, I believe he's an Arab, Sirhan, and he is allegedly upset at RFK's support of Israel. And if you look at back, Craig, at all...
He's Palestinian.
It was Palestinian. Thank you, which makes even more sense, of course. Right. So a Palestinian really upset for RFK support of Israel. That's the cover story. If you look back at all the presidents who've been assassinated, and we covered some of them with the Federal Reserve, there are cover stories about the motivations of the assassins that when you really, really look at them, don't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. They just don't make a whole hell of a lot of sense because they're being run. So Sirhan, this is really, to me, Manchurian Candidate, dude. I'm just going to put it out there. You and I talked MK Ultra. We talked Artichoke. Oh, do you know, it was just in the news yesterday. No one from the United States that was victimized by Artichoke in Canada at McGill University is allowed to sue. They have
really?
no recourse. Yeah, no
Wow.
recourse. Yeah, that was just in the news yesterday. So topical. So Sirhan, why do I say this? Manchurian Candidate and all. Erratic behavior before. He shows up at the hotel. He's walking around. He's like really dirty. He's not hiding or anything. Like he's way out in the open and he's drawing attention to himself because he's acting weird. After he shoots, he puts down the gun, immediately becomes calm, is immediately subdued by bystanders and hotel staff, doesn't give any resistance at all. And after the arrest, he's making these incoherent statements. He's disoriented, like court psychologists are going, this guy is off. This isn't right. He's not crazy, but it's weird. And he doesn't remember doing it. And he keeps saying, I did it for my country. I did it for my country. I did it for my country. Just like in his diary that they find later, RFK must die. RFK must die. Sounds like psychic driving. Sounds like sinister mantras. And I do think that by this time, the psychic driving was working well enough. I'd like to do the John Lennon assassination sometime because there are really strange ties with that guy in psychic driving. And
because even like the time, I mean, it makes sense. Here's this Palestinian that would do this stuff. You have Kennedy at that time. He was declaring, massive support for Israel.
Yeah.
And so, it would be the perfect setup. I mean, because this one and the other one kind of tying into the same, there was pressure on the Democrat side to make him as a possible running mate for Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
Too. So, which would be, especially if Johnson was involved with the JFK thing, the last thing you want is brother being in the VP office. Because then he's going to have access to stuff where he can ask questions.
Absolutely, and he knew a lot of stuff anyway. He knew about the UFOs. He knew about the Cuba stuff. I mean, he and Jack were tight. They were tight. So let's talk about why. Not just because Joey says, "Oh, artichoke," and so that leads to Manchurian Candidate because the guy was disoriented and he could be in shock because he didn't realize what he did. So he was carrying a 22 that had 8 bullets in it. Okay, they know this. He had a 8-shot 22. The number of bullets fired did not match. There are actual acoustic tests that they've done on recordings of what was happening at the time, and they count at least 13 shots. So that means that there had to be at least 2 gunmen. The number of wounds sustained by RFK is evidence of a second gunman. Plus, and Craig, I didn't realize this, and it's really kind of sad. That Connolly was wounded when JFK was shot. Did you know that 5 other people were shot?
Yeah, there's 5.
One in the head. Okay,
yeah.
You knew that.
I knew the injuries.
Yeah. So that's another at least 5 bullets. Now, this guy was called Paul Schrade, the one that got shot in the head. He was the UAW rep in California. He said he was convinced that there was a second gunman. Chief Medical Examiner Coroner for the County of Los Angeles, Thomas Noguchi, stated that the fatal shot was behind RFK's right ear, delivered at approximately from 1 inch away. That completely discounts Sirhan. And that's the narrative that RFK Jr. is pushing. That the second shooter went right up to him in all the chaos, right? Sirhan is firing, emptying his gun. And the guy just goes up to him and plugs him one behind the ear, mafia style. Go ahead.
I'm just like, I'm not I'm not a ballistics, professional at all. I mean, I've noticed that just a 22 long rifle bullet is not, gonna it would have to be pretty much point blank to
Yeah.
do anything really super catastrophic. I mean, it's just
Right.
shot in the right place. I mean, it can still be deadly, but just like just like some of the ballistics. I mean, I've got a picture, like one, there was a crude drawing. That 22 bullet, that's not going to pass through your arm.
Right.
That long, that it's going to embed. I mean, it's just it doesn't have the velocity. Like I
Yeah.
said, it's not going to be like these other bullets. And so it just, out of a gun, especially if you want to kill somebody, a 22 is not the best option.
No, but it is an assassination for close range because, like Steve Martin says in My Blue Heaven, it kind of rattles around in your brain like that.
Yeah, and that's like I said,
So
if you can
die.
get close range, but like if you're
Yeah.
going to shoot from a distance, it's not the best. I mean,
No.
Jack Ruby's thing, the 38, that's going to do a lot more damage,
Exactly.
and that's where. So,
And it
then
wasn't
one,
even a long rifle, Craig. I have a 22 long rifle with hollow point bullets, and so
Yeah.
I know what it can do and what it can't do. It can't do much.
yeah, and so anybody that shot a 22, you see the target. It's like it's not blowing gigantic holes out the back of anything. I mean, it's just
No.
it's making like a paper target. You're going to see the little hole, and then it's going to, it's not. It's not going to really decimate anything. I mean, if you walked right up and shot him like in the ear hole, yeah, you're gonna, there's a really good chance you're gonna kill could kill somebody.
Yeah, I used to target shoot like milk jugs and tin cans on my old property in West Virginia, probably from about 20 feet away. It doesn't make a ripping. It's penetrative. It's, it's very specific. So who was this guy? Who was the second shooter potentially? That is really interesting to me. So the guy is a security guard. His name is Thane Eugene Caesar, who supposedly fired the shot, point blank range. That's what RFK Jr. says. It's whatever the people said. Check this out. This guy is working part-time as a security guard, happens to be at the Ambassador Hotel on JFK's detail. This guy is actually working at Lockheed Martin with a defense security clearance, and then he goes to work for Hughes Aeronautics.
Of course he does.
So, read in dudes. Hughes was tight with all these guys, BB Rebozo, Nixon. It's a crazy thing. I have a very salacious book about Howard Hughes. I was very disappointed about this book, but I read it. I think it's the one that they based The Aviator on, but it's more like which guys he was sleeping with and girls he was sleeping with and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, like Charles says, 22, nice squirrel round. But it's an assassination. It's an assassination bullet, assassination weapon, and they would want to give Sirhan something that would match, obviously. So
now here's real quick before you go too much further. Hold that thought. Yep. One of the things, because like you said earlier, his gun was held 8 bullets, and so RFK was shot 4 times. 3 times, hit him. 1 went through his jacket, and then 5 other victims were hit. So unless one of those other victims was hit with a bullet that went through his jacket or something like that, the ballistics right there don't matter. There's 9 bullets. Right. So the only way it would work is if the one that missed went through his jacket was one of the ones that struck.
Right.
Somebody else that got shot, and that's so.
And here's something else. Again, not being ballistics experts, Paul Schrade was standing right next to RFK. He took a bullet in the head. It did some damage to his skull, but it did not penetrate the brain. So did Paul Schrade have a thicker skull than RFK? I mean,
he pretty much showed what if you get shot by 22, most people, as I said, it has to be a lucky, just like the perfect shot to do this stuff. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if it was through the ear hole or through the eye or something like that, then it would be there's a chance it could get in and do some damage. But yeah, most of the time, most people get shot with 22, it's exterior injury. You don't really have too much of internal damage from a 22.
And that was exactly what happened with Schrade, which becomes really important. So they talk to Cesar, right? And he shows him a 32 caliber. He's like, nope, this is what I got. I pulled out my gun, but it's a 32. It only came out later that he owned a 22, and he said he sold it like 3 years later. He actually sold it 2.5 or 3 months later. So there were lies there. And somebody wound up with the gun that killed RFK. Now, here's what's really interesting. September 16th of this year, 2023, and Craig, this did not get a lot of coverage. I talked to people and they don't even friggin' know what happened. 14 miles from the Ambassador Hotel at the Wilshire Ebel Theater, RFK Jr. was giving a speech, and a man was arrested with 2 shoulder holsters, with loaded pistols, ammo mags, and was carrying a U.S. Marshal badge.
Now, was that the one that just happened in California?
Yeah. 14 miles from where his father was killed. With a guy with false credentials. It was almost like a mirror. Now, who was behind that? Was it legit? RFK Jr. has been screaming about Secret Service, and he's wrong what he said. He said every presidential candidate gets Secret Service. They do not. 120 days before the election, and you have to be considered what's called a major candidate.
Yeah, major candidate. Yeah, just because you run for president doesn't mean you get Secret Service.
Yeah, you'd bankrupt the country, which we don't want the country bankrupt.
If the thing, I mean, it looks, you see what a danger the Kennedys still seem to be to this deep state, to this thing, because here, JFK Jr., killed in the air crash, so obviously he never really was too much in on the political side. He was more of the social warrior, so he was never really a threat. RFK Jr., he's more, because even right now you see the Democrat side's freaking out that he's looking to go independent.
Yeah, in 5 days he has an announcement in Philadelphia.
And if so, you could see that this is probably, there's somebody that's kind of was starting to get in panic mode, and they were starting to, because if that's the same thing, it looks like they're like, this cannot happen, because if he gets in, he's going to take up the mantle of his uncle and dad. He's not going to let this go. Does that mean all of a sudden it's like, all right, here we go. It's just, no, but it's just, you could see if like this, what would be the purpose? Because right now, honestly, why would somebody need to be armed to the teeth with fake credentials to, and possibly be targeting RFK Jr.? Why? One, why now?
Right.
If he was this danger, it's like, take him out before he's on the political scene. It's like, who are you going to, why do you target him now? Well, it's because he's actually starting to be a legitimate threat.
Yeah. Yeah. And we know from everything that's gone on with Trump and all this, that presidents can declassify things. They have that power.
Yeah.
So he could get in and start opening up the vaults that nobody's done.
He doesn't have to go. The president, and that's the thing. A lot of people said with Trump, there really isn't. You don't have a committee you have to clear these things by.
Right.
The president has advisors like, well, I want to declassify. Oh, sir, we can't. MK Ultra. You're going to expose this stuff. And then we're going to. No, if they wanted to, day one, Biden could have gone in and said, "Here, he could release everything." And there's nothing. There's no congressional oversight. There's, it's basically the president just declassified this information.
Right. And it seems like I'm going to talk about this next week with Carter, that he was pushing Bush. He wanted to know about UFOs. He had seen a UFO in the late 1960s, he and 10 other people in Georgia, and he wanted to know. And he went to see Bush, and he came back and he cried at his desk. So whatever they tell these people, why did, the Clintons had Lawrence Rockefeller, of all people, really pushing hard. And that's where that whole new Roswell case closed. Oh, it was crash test dummies from Japan. And
I think because everybody goes in there. There's a reason why presidents come in. Look, in 8 years, Barack Obama went from having, dark hair to he's suddenly, the color of my beard here. His hair. You're like, that doesn't happen naturally over, just less than an 8 years time. I go, there's some serious stuff that a president, is faced with, exposed to. It's not, that definitely takes a toll on you. So it's, you can see then that's kind of where I lead some of these like people. You'll hear people, it's like the deep state. I'm tired of hearing. I'm like, no, there's definitely. You look around, there's definitely the stuff. I mean, how many you go through history? How many times are you going to see stuff that definitely people have this entrenched power, these programs, all this money's tied in through industrial military complex, through you go through the medical system, all the stuff is entrenched. And if anybody's a threat to it, you really think, I'm going to drop a name here, I'm just a name, alleged. Do you think Pfizer would settle, like if if Kennedy Jr. got elected and he said, I'm going to outlaw, making any profit off of a medication? You don't think that Pfizer, Johnson, all these companies are going to get together and say, we got to take out this guy? Because you're talking billions of dollars that would be threatened. I go, and once you could threaten people's pocketbooks, I mean, it's sad as it is, people are dying at convenience stores for $20 in the register.
Yeah.
What do you think somebody's going to do over, 50, 60 billion?
That's right. And Agenda 30's coming, the World Economic Fund, Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and all these guys are getting increasing power. And I'm putting together some really good shows for you guys, probably in the spring, connecting all these dots through eugenics, through transhumanism, through biomed, population control, all this kind of stuff. Craig, it makes me think of the Georgia Guidestones, which got blown up weirdly. After we did our episode, our RTC episode.
And that's the thing, is like the Guidestones. Can we just a little side note? Can we talk about the fact that nobody has even that everybody seems to have just completely forgotten that somebody randomly detonated an explosive, and that instead of an investigation, they immediately bring in strong, heavy equipment, level the thing, haul it away, and everybody's like, what explode? They're just, it's like the Vegas shooting.
Yes.
I mean, have we just completely forgotten that this, these things are just people, all this stuff's come up, and people, it's like, don't forget this stuff. Nobody investigated the Georgia Guidestones.
No, they got rid of all the evidence.
Yeah, they not even an investigation. They literally roped it off. Heavy equipment knocked the rest of the stuff down. Yep. They hauled it all away, and all we know of is that there was footage of a car.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, and you brought up Las Vegas, and then we got to get out of here. But it's the way this stuff goes out. The chief investigator for Vegas, which just kind of disappeared after. You want to talk about bullet patterns and bullet numbers and all that kind of stuff in the hotel room and how many people were shot and the logistics of all that. The chief investigator for Las Vegas wound up as the chief of police in Maui.
Amazing how.
Yeah, just like how JFK. So two things. JFK is killed in Dallas, where the brother of the fired, shamed deputy director of the CIA, happens to be his brother. And Allen Dulles headed up the Warren Commission, a guy that Kennedy fired. They put him in charge of the investigation to who killed the guy who killed him.
Yeah, it's somebody who could care less.
Yeah. So,
I got a divorce, so I'm going to hire my ex-wife to look into whether or not I've done something wrong with my phone. Is that they could care less.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
so deep state, folks, is not.
I'm not divorced, by the way, people. That was
far from.
Yes.
You had
24
recently, didn't you?
24. Yeah, 24 years married. Yeah.
You guys are just a couple years behind us. We'll be 26 in December. Deep state, it does not equate with Illuminati. That's not what's going on. It is continuity in the government over decades. Craig and I shared with you guys that were heads of the Federal Reserve for decades. That's what we're talking about with the deep state. We're talking with people like Dulles when they resign and they just go on to be power players behind the scenes. People like Henry Kissinger. People like Allen Dulles. Operation Paperclip. Let's leave them with some math, Craig. 2,500 confirmed Nazis come over to this country in the late 1950s. How many people have they bred, and they're, in the generations now that have followed? These were people that were at the highest level of military, of government, and of science. Confirmed Nazis. So when you do that math and you really think about that, that is the deep state. Kelly Johnson, Martin Corporation, then Lockheed Martin. That is the deep state, folks. People, all these aeronautics firms. Hughes Aerospace is still around. Now it's all being privatized. So that's the deep state. Would you agree, my friend?
Oh yeah, well, it's exactly what it is, because it's people. I mean, it's not some nefarious, smoke room where everybody's smoking cigars. It's even people like Mitch McConnell's wife. She has been, she's transcended administrations.
Yeah.
So these are people that have connections, and that's what the deep state is. It has nothing to, because like right now, Joey could become president. The next election, he could become president. But the thing is, there's still people in the CIA, FBI, Department of Defense, all these people that have been there for 30 years. They don't care about Joey. He's going to be a thing. They're going to watch what he does, and if he steps out of line, then the pressure points are going to come in, and you're going to have the power players that are going to like, Joey, we really shouldn't make these guys our enemies because they kind of help us out down the line, and they'll do this, and that's what the deep state is. People think X-Files, like there's these guys that are in league with the aliens. No. Deep state is literally, it could be Bob that's been in the Department of Defense for 35 years, and he's going to make sure that you're not going to step on his project that he's working on down in New Mexico. You're not going to touch that project.
That's exactly right. And I know we're going on a bit, but we'll wrap up. But so when they said that Trump was coming in to drain the swamp and was an enemy of the deep state, he brought in all these outsiders, right? Steve Bannon, Rex Tillerson, on and on. It was a disaster. And unless you're a Beltway insider, the buses don't run. And that's what they found out. You could get absolutely nothing done. And that's why Mitch McConnell has 2 public mini strokes or whatever the hell they were. And the surgeon is compelled to say, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see. Everything's fine. It's perfectly normal. Because they don't want to get rid of these guys. Nancy Pelosi's husband, right? Isn't he involved with the stock market or something like that?
Oh yeah. There's all this stuff. It just you can see it. They're not even hiding it anymore.
No.
They're just wide in the open, and that's why I always laugh when people like deep state. I'm like, guys, it's literally right there. It doesn't have to be like the X-Files, the Cancer Man. It doesn't have to. You don't have to go to the extreme. It's just pretty easy to tell that these guys have been in power since the 70s, the 80s, and they're still there today. They just like I said, when you're dealing with billions of dollars, you're going to protect that. You're not going to be like, oh, well, I guess I'll, ride with Joe. I'm jumping on board with Joey. No, they're going to push back. And unfortunately, some people like JFK, the pushback is we have a an eternal burning flame in DC, and that's how these guys deal with people that refuse to bend the knee and turn the other eye. Is some people they actually have the cojones. Morally he may have been not the best person, but on the political sphere he just refused to bend the knee to these power players, and he paid the price.
And I'm really curious. His dad got him in naval intelligence, put him on the career track. His dad was very, did he go off script? Was Joe upset with what he was doing? Was Joe party to him trying to dismantle everything? Was that the game? So that's a subject for another time. I'm going to end with this one somewhat fittingly and hopefully not too creepy, but happy birthday, Mr. Ansel. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
I'll reach out to you tomorrow. Hopefully your Sinister Mysteries t-shirt will arrive. And next time we're doing Radon Corporation and public or corporate health scandals.
Yes.
But focus on Radon, and we'll look at some others.
Yeah, the Radon girls.
Yeah.
Yes, for people, it's just for everybody that has like their glow in the dark, dial things on their watch and stuff. That was from the ones, and these girls used to get the pins, the points and stuff. They'd lick them, and this was that with that radioactive paint, and they're doing all this stuff by hand, and that's it. Yeah, so that'll be So yeah, thanks again for all the birthday wishes, everybody.
Yeah,
Like,
well, there you go. From our
subscribe,
boss at Radio.
follow, reach out to Joey, DM that man. If you want one of those shirts, reach out to him and Tanya and get one of those things going. Same thing. They do have other products. Remember, they do make beard oil.
Charles said that Marilyn did it better. I didn't want to be too weird. I could do a pretty good Marilyn, but I didn't want to weird Craig out. So, yikes. Ooh, et tu, Brute. So, all right, we'll see everybody. Let's let Craig go get a jump on his birthday.
Good night, everybody.